This is the story of a family slowly coming apart under the weight of a scandal that simply refuses to fade. Right now, Prince Andrew, Sarah Ferguson, and their daughters Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie are all living separate, increasingly private lives. But is this really a family falling apart, or something else entirely? Today, we're pulling back the curtain, looking at what's really going on behind closed doors, what royal insiders are saying, and why two women may be paying the price for a scandal that was never theirs to begin with. Let's get into it. At first glance, it looks like the York family has quietly gone their separate ways. Andrew has retreated to Norfolk, staying far away from public life. Fergie has been spotted in Austria, reportedly staying in a luxury ski chalet costing around £2,000 a night. And Beatrice and Eugenie. They've kept an extremely low profile, avoiding attention, staying out of headlines. It all feels distant, but according to royal experts, this isn't a real breakup. It's something far more calculated. To understand what's happening now, we need to go back. Because this story didn't start yesterday. It's been building for decades. Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson divorced back in 1996 in one of the most talked-about royal separations of the time. The tabloids had a field day. Most people assumed that was the end, but it was. In fact, in a way, they never really separated at all. For years after their divorce, Andrew and Fergie continued living together at Royal Lodge in Windsor. They raised their daughters as a team. They attended events together. They even went on holidays together. The press called them the happiest divorced couple in the world. And honestly, it wasn't far from the truth. Their relationship was unusual, yes. But for them, and for their daughters, it worked, which is why what we're seeing now feels so different. Because this family has always stayed together, no matter what, until now. And that brings us to the name that changed everything, Jeffrey Epstein. It's a scandal that has dragged on for years and still hasn't gone away. Royal expert Duncan Larcombe described it perfectly. He said it's a story that just keeps rumbling on. And he's right. When previously sealed Epstein documents were released, millions of records became public. And the York family didn't come out of it well. Andrew's connections were already widely known, especially after his disastrous 2019 BBC interview, which effectively ended his public royal career. But this time, it wasn't just Andrew. Fergie's name appeared too, and perhaps most troubling of all, so did the names of Beatrice and Eugenie. Now, to be clear, neither daughter has been accused of any wrongdoing. But in today's world, sometimes just being mentioned is enough to pull you into a storm you never asked for. And that's exactly what's happened here. They've been dragged into a global scandal simply because of who their parents knew. So where does each member of the family stand now? Andrew has withdrawn almost completely from public life. He rarely appears, receives few visitors, and remains largely out of sight. Fergie, meanwhile, appears to be keeping her distance, at least publicly. But according to insiders, that distance may not be real. It may be strategic. A temporary move to protect her image while the scandal is still fresh. Because the truth is, her own links to Epstein make it difficult to completely separate herself from the situation. And then there are Beatrice and Eugenie. Perhaps the most sympathetic figures in all of this. They've spent years building independent lives, careers, marriages, families. They're not working royals. They don't rely on public funding. They've tried to stay out of controversy. And yet, once again, they've been pulled back in. According to Duncan Larcombe, they've essentially been hung out to dry, caught in a scandal they didn't create and can't escape. So what can they do? Very little, and that's exactly why their response has been silence. Beatrice skipped recent royal gatherings and spent time privately with her husband's family. Eugenie has also stayed out of the spotlight, focusing on her own family life. They're doing the only thing they can, keeping their heads down and waiting for the storm to pass. So what we're seeing right now, this distance, this separation, it may not be a real fracture. It may be a managed retreat, a way to protect each other without making it obvious. Because despite everything, this is still a very close-knit family, and according to those who know them best, that bond isn't going anywhere. As for the future, Beatrice, now 37, and Eugenie, 36, grew up in a home where despite all the drama, mom and dad remained a team. So when we talk about the Yorks drifting apart now, we need to understand just how unusual that is, because for this family, staying together, even after divorce, even after scandal, was simply the fact that they are now publicly distancing themselves from each other tells you something about just how serious the current situation has become. Now, that brings us to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I know we've heard the name so many times. The scandal has been going on for years. It feels at times like it will never end. And that actually is precisely the point. Because that's exactly what royal expert Duncan Larkham, former royal editor of The Sun and author of Prince Harry, The Inside Story, said when speaking to the Mirror recently. He described the Epstein scandal as something that seems to have no end, just rumbling on. And he's right. The release of the Epstein files by the U.S. Congress was a watershed moment. Millions of documents, correspondence, flight logs, internal communications were made available to the public, and the York family, to put it gently, did not come out of that well. Andrew's name appeared throughout the files, as many of you will already know. His friendship with Epstein had already been the subject of that catastrophic BBC News night interview back in 2019. The one that ended his public royal duties. The one that his team must have thought couldn't possibly go as badly as it did, and yet somehow managed to go. Even worse, that interview and the scandal surrounding it effectively ended Andrew's public life. He lost his military titles, his royal patronages, his HR. He retreated to Royal Lodge, and he has been there largely in private ever since. But the release of the Epstein files brought fresh pain, because this time it wasn't just Andrew's name in the documents. Sarah Ferguson's name was there, too. And this is the part that must feel deeply, deeply unfair. So were the names of Beatrice and Eugenie. These are two young women who were not accused of anything, but their names are in those files. And in today's world, that is enough to drag you into a spotlight you never asked for and never deserved. What kinds of mentions? Well, there is a crude reference in what appears to be a message, sent by Fergie herself referencing Eugenie's, "How shall we put this shagging weekend?" There is a request from Epstein that one of your daughters show someone around Buckingham Palace. And there are documents suggesting the York sisters visited Epstein with their mother shortly after his release from prison in 2010. Andrew is unlikely to ever return to public royal life. Fergie will likely continue navigating her way through controversy, as she always has. And Beatrice and Eugenie. Their best path forward is the one they're already on. Stay private. Stay quiet. Focus on their own lives, because in the end, this may not be their story at all. But they're the ones living with the consequences. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like. It really helps the channel grow. And if you're new here, we cover stories like this every week.
Really split in the way
So
most
hit
divorce couples
subscribe,
do.
and I'll see you in the
They
next one.
remained extraordinary.